Today I'm fighting by internet, not by air, land, or sea. Welcome to the show, folks. This is the first of a sort of series of ramblings and vlogs that will supplement my main content, discussion content. And this is something that I've been meaning to do for a while, because when I got back into gaming as the main focus of this channel, and I'm talking about War Thunder specifically now, War Thunder was something that I strongly considered getting back into, because it still has an audience, right? People are still looking for War Thunder content. Yeah, I started up the channel with War Thunder, and most of my support base came from me making fun of it. I've said that again and again and again, and I should refrain from elaborating that point because it's been done so much and you all get the gist of it by now. But there's a reason I made fun of it. There's a reason the character of Slavaslav was born. Believe me, I wanted to make the channel into a completely War Thunder-centric channel. It seemed like a golden opportunity to build a support base. There have been problems with the game I overlooked up until the release of patch 1.37, problems that I thought could be overlooked in the grand scheme of things because there seemed to be so much passion built into this project. I did what I did because I was passionate about the game, and I wanted it to do well, and it was frustrating to see the project go to waste. See, when I first loaded up War Thunder years ago, I was euphoric that a next-gen flight sim could finally see the light of day, because this was a genre that hadn't really been explored that much, and it was a genre that I grew up with. But you know what this game had that others like it lacked? It had class. It had a certain kind of sophisticated charm to it. World of Tanks was marketed to just about everyone, and that's fine. It took a more arcadey style approach to the genre, and Wargaming has made a shit zillion dollars off of perfecting that formula, trying to appeal to a mass audience. They have good marketers. But there was something more sophisticated about War Thunder, from the intricate details of the damage models, the artwork, the orchestral soundtrack, the attention to detail in the sound design. All of these little things were put together that made a very well-produced package. And when shit hit the fan, and the project lead started their chain of poor business decisions, I felt helpless. I had to say something. I had to put something out there that was legible, that was something that people could understand. That's why I did the rants. That's why I did the goofy videos. I knew they had to be polarizing. I couldn't be afraid of polarization because that would detract value from what I had to say. And look what it got us. Years later. I'll be the first to admit that many of my rants could certainly irritate some people. Especially anyone of Slavic blood. I'm American, hello? Okay, I'm proud and stubborn too, folks. It's in my blood. You combine that with the German Jewish blood and you got a really defensive, obstinate son of a bitch, alright? But I recognize that. I recognize that factor about myself. Slavaslav was created to poke fun at the fact that these Russian developers seemed out of touch with their Western audience. It's nothing personal. If it had been any other nationality with the same set of circumstances suggested, I would have done the same thing. If I was a Russian myself and I saw an American developer doing this, how many burger jokes do you think I would have made, huh? Has Gaijin acknowledged any of our criticisms? Have they acted on any of the things we complain about? When I said to myself, alright, I'll just log back in and see what's going on with this game, I didn't do that in malice. Okay, the first thing I did, I queued up an arcade battle ground forces, and you know what? I queued up in a BT tank, and it was fun. It was fun as hell. I liked it. Zipping around at high speed, bobbing and weaving around slopes, trying to hit my opponents from unexpected angles. Very, very fun. It was engaging, and I was not going to deny that Gaijin certainly modeled the feel of the vehicles well. And perhaps tanks in that aspect isn't as bad as I thought. For all I knew, the Russian vehicles that I had complained about at early tier had been sorted out. Germany was given vehicles that compete at those tiers, and America had been thrown in to spice things up. Maybe the M3 Leaf finally got nerfed. I didn't know. It had been so long. But if I were to do War Thunder content, it wasn't just going to be ground forces. There were other elements of the game people were interested in. So I thought to myself, alright, you know, I'm just going to make sure I'm actually enjoying this game. Just to make sure I'm not going to end up doing content for a game that irritates the hell out of me. Because Tanks was fun, but it's not something that I would do at length, right? Which would result in lack of quality in my content. I had to make sure something else was right. Most of the enjoyment I got in this game came from air historical battles, now called realistic battles. And you know the first map that I got? Fucking Alt History Kremsk. This is still a problem? They still haven't sorted out the matchmaking for mid-tier Russia, that this is still the most popular search? Alright, I mean, it's alternate history, so it's not like I'm making any complaints that haven't existed before. Well, folks, Gaijin really outdid themselves here. Right when I stopped playing the game, Right when I thought to myself, there's no way they could possibly make this worse. Oh, it got worse. That's right, I finally got to the title of the video. Aren't you happy? Mixed realistic battles. Battle ratings completely out of whack, the list goes on. And while I am a person who has a basic understanding of statistics and understands that there's going to be a certain level of skew present and only queuing up in a couple of battles and experiencing these problems, I don't think I need to conduct a fully categorized scientific test to see if the things I mentioned are prevalent throughout the game. Period. So let's get to it, huh? The concept of mixed realistic battles is stupid. And it's stupid for a number of reasons. This isn't a de facto list, it's just some things that occur to me off of the top of my head, but I'm sure you will all agree with me for these reasons. It defeats the purpose of realistic battles in the first place, primarily. So realistic battles had a previous title before Gaijin came in and mucked it up. It was called Historical Battles. And this mode was titled Historical Battles because this game mode was supposed to provide an alternative to arcade battles in that it provided players with a sort of mock-up of actual World War II battles. These modes were supposed to bring an entirely new level of tactical depth to the base game because the tactics that you formed were based off of a number of factors. The mission objective, the strengths and weaknesses of your aircraft, formations, how these elements were unique to different factions in the war, and how you as a player not only had to be a good dogfighter but also a good strategist in these senses. You had to base your actions off of not only what your side of the game was capable of and trying to accomplish, but also what the enemy was trying to do. War is organized chaos, and as such it provides an avenue for a great deal of strategic depth. That's why people play these games. I didn't play IL-2 because of the deathmatch game modes where you just fighting furballs of enemy planes crashing into each other to shoot each other down mindlessly. I played IL-2 because I was intrigued by this degree of complexity. For instance, a common circumstance of Soviet-designed aircraft engines is that they didn't operate well at high altitude. So Soviet pilots had to use their cunning to lure the Germans down to their level, get the more energy-fighting oriented pilots to waste their energy and become easy prey for the more nimble Russian aircraft. This played another role in formations because the increasingly powerful German tanks were obstacles that needed to be put out of the way. Even the famous T-32 was no match for a Panther, so the Soviets needed an aircraft solely dedicated to taking out ground targets, and it had to operate efficiently at low altitude because that's where the Soviet fighter escorts could function. So the Il-2 Sturmovik was created. And it was a unique aircraft. Don't think because I complain about Russian stuff in War Thunder means I'm detracting value from the designs that their engineers made. It was a low-altitude strike aircraft. It was something that was unique, hadn't really been experimented with before, maybe by the Germans a couple of times. But how would a Soviet player deal with the German players who obviously needed to shoot down the IL-2s? How would the German players break through and get shots on them? Would some players focus more on taking down the fighter escorts first as a group? Would maybe only a couple of pilots simply act as a distraction for the Soviet pilots and let others in the formation deal with the Sturmoviks? How would the Soviet players react to this? Would smart players that were communicating maybe fan out and try to cover as large a group as possible so that they could cover each other's backs in the events a German came down and tried to shoot them down? How would the IL-2s play a role in this? They had tail guns. Maybe players could take control of the IL-2's tail gunner separately from the pilot and focus solely on shooting down German assailant fighters. You can see where my mind went with this kind of stuff. The potential game modes and missions you could set up with this are endless. But Gaijin didn't want to do that. They took the easy route, allegedly, in order to get faster queue times. But would you really have a problem with slow queue times in RB, maybe a minute or 2 minutes long, if you made the mode interesting enough, like the way I described? It's because of the potential that this game has, and the fact that most of it seems to be being overlooked that leads me to believe that mixed realistic battles are just a fucking cop-out in that sense. There's no other reason to do it. Do you want a more interesting, organized, tactically engaging game mode, or arcade battles with different flight models? Because the latter is what you get, and it sucks. But if there is a demand for this, however small, and it might be there, if there is a demand for arcade battle matches with realistic flight models, why not make a separate mode specifically for that? No, if you want to fly your Zero, you're gonna have to do it over Berlin sometimes, buddy. Deal with it. That's what we're being told. Because it would take too much effort to organize all of this. It would take too much effort to set up these missions. We gotta work on British tanks, comrade. It's tea time, motherfucker. And by tea, I mean money. That's all the money we're gonna get when we release the fucking British tanks starter pack or whatever shit these people have cooked up for us. And what about the battle ratings? Let's talk about that real quick, even though I'm pretty sure you all know what I'm going to get into. I'm queuing up in my A6M2, right? Now, this is realistic battles, which means that I'm in for a realistic scenario, right? Like a fight that happened. Like Midway. A series of battles in which the A6M2 was used? No, it's not uncommon for you to get Saipan, a conflict zone during the Battle of the Philippine Sea, which was in 1944. And the A6M2 was eventually replaced by the A6M5 by then, but we're still using it. Why? Because, I don't know. Not to mention, we're queued up with the J2M2. Now, I'm not complaining that the Raiden is flying during the Battle of Saipan. What I'm complaining about is that it's the M2, which was built in 1942 and never saw service. That plane got scrapped. The Raiden didn't see the J2M3 or M4, I don't fucking know. The point is, it didn't come into being until 1944. So we got these two planes that never flew at the Philippine Sea under the tag realistic battle. We also got Spitfires, not Seafires, the Navy equivalent, flying around here in the Pacific with nowhere to land. That's why they get air starts, because they can't launch from carriers. And capture Japanese BF-109s? This mode is a fucking joke. Why would anyone want to play it? And that's another thing, right? This game was supposed to be so much more than just new content constantly being thrown at it. World of Tanks is doing that because it's an arcade game and they can throw in all sorts of blueprints they found, and I'm not going to complain about that. What the hell, I like the idea of getting to play a game where everybody gets some representation. Throw in the Polish tanks. Maybe not a full tree, but some premiums are fine. In War Thunder, Gaijin had outlined in times before that there were going to be two things coming. We were going to get two new nations at some point for the air forces, those being Italy and France. Italy was a major power during the war, and it had a very large, very well-developed air force with some unique designs and good pilots. Some of the most potent machines of the war were made by Italian engineers, the Mach-E 202 and the tri-engine SM-78. These planes are in the game, they're modeled, they're a mini-branch of the German tree, and that makes sense if that's all we're ever gonna get, but that was assumed to be a temporary thing. It seems like Gaijin has totally forgotten about it. How interesting do you think that would have been, huh? That would have been cool as shit. Put it into context in realistic battles. How about a mission that takes place in the Mediterranean theater, where Italian tri-engine torpedo bombers have to make an attack on a formation of British ships off of the coastline? Can you imagine? All these planes flying at low altitude, the bellies of their planes just floating over the water, glistening in the sun. Flak is up in the air from the escort ships in the fleet. Machine gun fire flares up from all of these planes in this formation as the gunners frantically try to keep the British fighters off of their tails. Spitfires dart around in a frenzy as they try to decide when to engage the bombers and when to pull away and defend themselves from German escorts, and the mission objective could be to blow up a certain vessel in the fleet. What if this was all part of this World War mode that Gaijin keeps talking about? What if this was part of an ongoing conflict between two alliances in the game comprised of real players? What if this had been planned out? Like the fleet was an asset for the alliance that was a British clan for this particular campaign, and the torpedo bombers and the German allies were part of another clan. If the ship got sunk, that could be a significant blow to the British alliance. Maybe that ship is the flagship of the fleet and would have proved necessary in a frontline push that the British at the time desperately needed. This is the game that I wanted. This is the game that they could make, but they're not making it, or at least they're not trying, and that's the part that really stinks. I think a lot of grief could have been avoided if Gaijin had never bothered with including realistic battles or simulator battles in the first place, because that's obviously not what they're paying attention to when they don't plan on it. This recent effort to speed up queue times is just a cop-out, like I said. It's a symptom of a much larger problem, a problem with the game at its core. Gaijin is focusing on making War Thunder into a World of Tanks killer, but at the same time, they're still trying to make money off of it. We still have the inclusion of this wager system bullshit with the paid RNG loot drop crates. This kind of stuff is despicable for a free-to-play developer to pull off, let alone a full $60 title release, and you as a consumer shouldn't stand for it. I'm talking about you guys. I'm talking about the people that have been with me since the very start, you glorious bastards. You all know exactly what I'm talking about. This is not the game that we were promised. This is not the game that Gaijin wanted to make in the first place. And we, as consumers, have watched it dissipate right before our very eyes. We, as consumers, have seen how horrible it is for a team of talented artists and designers and modelers and all sorts of different people from all different sorts of skill sets when they come together to try and make something really, really awesome, and then it gets fucked over by incompetent project leads or greedy marketing teams. Gaijin's apologists just reinforce this kind of disingenuous behavior from free-to-play developers, and I shouldn't get mad at them for liking the game, but I can and will get upset with them for acting like this stuff isn't a problem, because it's part of what makes free-to-play such a shady business model. It's part of what gives it the reputation that it has. This kind of crap has caused IPs with a great amount of history and passion put into them over several years to fall apart. Such was the fate of MechWarrior Online. It has a cult following, but not nearly as much as it was supposed to get. War Thunder suffers from the same. What we get here is a relatively fun shoot-'em-up arcade game with some redeeming qualities, but it's grindy, it's got all sorts of balance problems that could have been fixed ages ago, and meanwhile the devs are still focusing on adding new shit. I recognize that I make World of Tanks content, and that game has problems as well. In fact, I already have plans for some discussion videos similar to this in regards to stuff like that. But the problems that Wargaming faces from a balance perspective aren't nearly as bad as what War Thunder offers right now. Wargaming is shrewd, but they're smart. They know how to market, and they know how to put statistics into perspective and put out a product that not necessarily everyone likes. You know, maybe the guys on What Labs will complain about it, but not everyone who pays for premium time, premium tanks, etc. This game was supposed to be the fucking bee's knees, man. I wanted to form up a gaming alliance comprised of people, my closest friends who knew how to organize people. I wanted to make an American Air Force alliance, with different squadrons set up to do different roles, and people could have been a part of different flights and whatnot, similar to how real militaries operated and performed in the war. Not like Arma 3 hardcore, but enough that we were serious about organizing stuff. I wanted this game to take advantage of its situation and create something really, really awesome. I wanted to make custom skins for my alliance that were unique to them, something that they could feel a part of and put on their planes to represent themselves. I wanted people to feel proud to call themselves Heartbreak Leader or the wingman to one of the most decorated aces in the squadron. I wanted people to come together and experience disappointment maybe, but learn from those disappointments and become stronger, become cohesive, organized units of players that could have real triumphs. Stuff like this is why we play games. It's why we seek to become parts of larger collectives in these games. But War Thunder isn't going to provide any of that because the integral part of the game itself is broken and it stinks. You do not owe Gaijin anything. We can appreciate the efforts of their art department, their music department, and pretty much everyone else aside from the project leads and the marketing team. But these people do not have our interests at heart. That is the project leads and the marketing team. They do not know how to balance player interest with commercial gain. They're minimizing the amount of effort they put in while maximizing profits, and they're doing so to an extreme that is disappointing. Anything else I'm gonna say is just like a broken record at this point, but my point still stands. Their fans at large did not want mixed historical battles. They didn't want this wager system. They didn't want arcade maps and realistic battles. And on and on and on. And people bitched and moaned and held polls and complained on the forums, and they did it anyway. What does that say about them? It means they don't give a shit. That shows something very degrading about them, not us. We're bitching, but we have a damn good reason to, and forget about anyone else who says otherwise. My name is Gregor Havener. Feel free to like and subscribe for more content like this, and thank you so much for watching.